Now, flip it. Islam wins. What happens?
I think the division gets even more interesting because then the question becomes, who can actually beat Islam?
Hello, hello. One of the most interesting fights of the UFC summer. It's finally here. Islam Makhachev, Ian Machado Garry Welterweight Championship. And this isn't just another title fight. No, because Islam Makhachev is trying to establish himself as the best fighter at the 170 pounds after already dominate the lightweight division. Hello, guys. Welcome.
Hi. Ian Machado Garry is coming in as the number one contender. He's 17-1. He's long, he's tactical, and he's coming off 2 straight victories after suffering the first loss of his professional career against Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Yes, guys, and from the betting perspective, this is fascinating because we are looking at a massive favorite. Current prices have Makachev around minus 320 to minus 365, depending on the sports book, with Garry around plus 255 to plus 280. So UFC Unleashing currently has it around Makachev minus 350 and Garry plus 275. So, guys, the question isn't simply who's going to win? No, is Islam actually worth that price? And if Garry wins, what happens to the entire welterweight division? Welcome back to La Casa No Gana. Now let's talk about this fight and let's establish the situation, guys. So Islam Makhachev moved up from lightweight after vacating that title and captured the welterweight championship at UFC by dominating Jack de la Madalena over 5 rounds. And now he's defending the 170-pound title for the first time.
Yep. And that's important because this isn't just Islam is moving up to fight a bigger guy. We have already seen him 170 pounds, and he looked extremely comfortable.
Which is exactly why the market is pricing him like this at around minus 350. The sport books is essentially saying we believe Islam wins the fight a lot more often than he loses it. But here's the betting question, guys. How often is enough? Because if you're paying minus 350, you're not just asking, does Islam win? You're asking, does Islam win often enough to justify risking that price? Exactly, Fabi. Now, Tom, let's talk fighting. What's the actual matchup?
Okay, so it's really fascinating because on paper, you have 2 different fighters. Islam's greatest weapon is still his ability to impose his grappling. But what makes him dangerous is that he's not simply a wrestler anymore. He's developed a lot. He's striking, and his entries are much more difficult to read now. So he can threaten with the takedown and then attack from the clinch or striking range. And once he gets you down, you're dealing with one of the best positional grapplers in MMA.
And Garry?
Well, Garry's biggest weapon is distance. He's really tall, he's long, and he's very comfortable fighting at range. So he can make the opponent reach. He can manipulate the distance, and he's very good at making fights happen on his own terms.
But Tom, we also have to talk about the loss because Garry's first professional loss come against Shavkat Rakhmonov.
Yeah, and that's important context. Garry lost that fight by unanimous decision at UFC 310. And it was the first time we'd seen him genuinely have to deal with an opponent that could consistently threaten him with elite grappling and physical pressure.
But he didn't collapse after it.
Exactly. He came back and beat Carlos Prates, then followed that up with a unanimous decision win over Belal Mohamed. So the question isn't, is Garry undefeated? We know he's not. But the better question is, did that first loss reveal a ceiling, or did it Garry have the experience he needed to evolve?
And that's an enormous betting question, Tom. So now let's talk about numbers. My favorite part, of course. The line open around Makhachev minus 278 to minus 300, depending on the book. With Garry around plus 240 to plus 250. Since then, the market has moved toward Islam. Some books have him around minus 350 or higher.
So the market has become more expensive.
Yes, Bobby, and that matters because there's a huge difference between Islam minus 250 and Islam minus 350.
Yeah, the fighter didn't suddenly become 40% better.
Exactly, Tom. So the price changed, and that's where bettors get themselves into trouble. They think Islam is going to win, but that doesn't answer the betting question.
Okay, let's make it simple, very simple. At minus 350, Islam needs to win roughly 77.8 of the time just to break even.
Correct, Fabi. So if personally believe Islam wins a fight 80% of the time, there isn't much age. But if I believe he wins 85%, now we're talking about a different situation.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if I put him at 85%.
Interesting. So, Tom, you're first. No headling. Who wins?
Islam Makhachev. But I don't think this is necessarily an easy fight. I think Garry is going to have success early. He's going to make Islam work to close the distance. And he's going to use his jab a lot, his movement, his kicks. And there will be probably moments where Islam will look frustrated, but eventually Islam starts solving the distance problem and he gets Garry to the cage. He starts chaining attacks, and once Garry had to defend takedowns continuously, his striking will become less and less dangerous.
Method?
I think Islam by decision, possibly late submission if Garry gets exhausted, but my primary prediction is Makhachev by unanimous decision.
Interesting, Tom, because if you're saying decision, that could create a much more interesting betting market than simply playing Islam at minus 350.
Exactly.
So, Pau, your turn. What are you actually betting?
I'm not interested in blindly lying at minus 350.
There is it, yes.
I think Fabi Islam is the rightful favorite, but the favorite and the bet are two different things. At around minus 350, the market is demanding a very high win probability. And I think Gary's ability to stay at range creates enough uncertainty that I don't want to pay that premium.
So you're taking Garry?
Not necessarily, Tom. That's important distinction. I can think Islam wins and simultaneously think Islam minus 350 is a bad bet.
So, what will you actually play?
I look at Islam by decision or potentially a Garry decision prop if the price becomes attractive enough, because Gary's more realistic path to winning is keeping the fight standing, managing distance, and winning rounds.
I totally agree with that. I don't see Garry submitting Islam, and I don't see him overpowering him on the ground. If Garry wins, I think it probably comes through 5 rounds of disciplined striking.
Yes, so Fabi, you haven't picked yet, so it's your turn.
I'm going Islam, but I'm going to make it interesting.
Let's see how.
Okay, Islam wins, okay? But I'm not betting the money line at minus 350. I'm looking for Islam by decision.
Exactly, Fabi, actually where I am.
Because I don't think Garry it's easy to finish. He's incredibly long, it's difficult to catch clean, and he is not going to willingly stand in front of Islam.
And that's key. Islam can dominate someone without necessarily finishing them.
Exactly. So, Islam by decision. That's my decision right now.
Islam by decision.
And my pick, Islam by decision, but only at the right price.
Now, let's talk about the really interesting part. What happens if Ian Machado Garry actually wins?
I think everything changes.
Of course, immediately, because suddenly Islam isn't this unstoppable force at 170, and Gary becomes the center prize of one of the deepest divisions in the UFC.
And that's not exaggeration, okay? Look at the names around the division: Carlos Prates, Michael Morales, Jack de la Madalena, Mohamed, Sean Brady. My God.
Yeah, and that's why Gary's previous loss is actually relevant. If he beats Islam after losing to Ragmanov, that tells us something extremely important. Gary can lose, he can be challenged, but he can also learn and come back better.
Yes, and that's exactly what makes the potential future betting market so interesting. If Gary wins, he goes from can the other underdog pull it off to can Gary actually become the dominant champion? That's completely different market.
Now, flip it. Islam wins. What happens?
I think the division gets even more interesting because then the question becomes who can actually beat Islam?
And Tom, suddenly we are looking at the next wave. Carlos Prates, Michael Morales, potentially another contender depending on what happens. And Islam himself has recently pointed toward Prates as a particularly interesting future opponent.
And Michael Morales is already positioned close to the title picture.
Yeah, and I think that's an incredible matchup because Morales is a very different problem than Gary.
Which is why this division is so interesting. Gary is one problem, Prates is another, Morales another, and Islam has to solve all of them.
So let's finish with the question every bettor is asking: is Islam Makhachev minus 350 a good bet?
Why, Fabi, I don't think it's automatically a good bet.
Yeah, but I think Islam is the most likely winner.
Okay, I think those two statements can coexist.
Absolutely. And that's the entire lesson of this episode. Islam wins without believing. Islam minus 350 is valuable.
Yeah, and that's what makes this fight fascinating because Gary doesn't have to be the better fighter overall. He just has to win often enough to justify his price.
And at plus 275, that's a very different proposition. Okay, final predictions. Tom.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Islam Makhachev by unanimous decision.
I'm going to say same winner, but my bet is Makhachev by decision if the price is right. And I'm staying away from lying, minus 350 on the money line.
I'm also taking Makhachev by decision, and if I had to take the underdog, I'd rather take Garry on the money line than trying to predict some crazy knockout prop. Because this path is clear. Stay standing, control distance, make Islam work, and win rounds.
Yep, that's basically the entire fight.
So, Islam Makhachev versus Ian Machado Garry, a champion trying to establish himself at 170 pounds, a former undefeated contender, now 17-1, trying to take the belt from a man who currently sits at the top of the welterweight division.
But remember, the question isn't always who's going to win. It is the price correct?
Yeah, because it's MMA. So one mistake can turn a minus 350 favorite into a plus 275 champion.
And what about if Garry pulls this off? The welterweight division, it's officially chaos.
And what about Fabi if Islam wins? Then we are asking a much scarier question. Who the hell can bet this guy at 170 pounds?
Well, finding out this Saturday, this is La Casa No Gana.
Yeah, good luck with your bets.
And shop those lines.
Always in La Casa No Gana. We are waiting for you on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Discord, all of our platforms. Please register yourself in lacasanogana.com. Remember to subscribe, remember to enter your information, and please verify yourself to collect all the money from this UFC night. See you next week. Bye.